Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we are here today broadcasting from Zaytuna College with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf here with us. And this particular broadcast is a broadcast of the Lamppost Education Initiative. And just to give a little bit of a background about what Lamppost has been about for some years now, but Lamppost largely, for the most part, is an online and on-site educational initiative, and in some ways you can see it as an extension of some of the efforts of Zaytuna and part of the overall larger mission of sort of indigenizing Islam in America, in that we try our best to sort of focus on showcasing certain indigenous scholars, and that, of course, that indigenous doesn't necessarily have to do any particular race, but indigenous scholars with people themselves who can better contextualize Islam for the American public. This month of Ramadan, we have been running a series of daily reflections by a number of different of our students of knowledge, activists, Muslim scholars, who actually are here in the United States. And most of those particular talks have been focused on chapters from the Imam Ghazali's Al-Arba'in fi Usul al-Din, whereas the presenters would come on and they would summarize particular sections from the actual book, and then offer any musings or reflections they may have about it. And today we have chosen, I've chosen or actually recommended for Sheikh Hamza to offer his reflections on Imam Ghazali's dissection related to the benefits of hunger, being that we're in the month of Ramadan. So we want to make sure that people leave this month with as much benefit as you can possibly get. So if you have anything to offer, please do.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. First of all, Allah yubarak fi juhudikum. May Allah bless all your efforts, Sheikh Abdullah. The Arba'in fi Usul al-Din is a very important book, I think, in a lot of ways, because he summarized a lot of the points that he was trying to make in the Ihya. And one of the things about our community historically is that Imam Al-Ghazali really took the position that somebody like St. Thomas Aquinas had in the Catholic tradition, of just somebody who really was seen as the embodiment of orthodoxy. And it's quite tragic that a lot of modern Muslims tend to disparage him from certain segments. The idea that he was a Sufi, even though he was a great critic of the Sufis. The idea that he destroyed philosophy, even though he was a great philosopher. The idea that he gets it from a lot of different angles. But for me, one of the most important things to remember about Imam al-Ghazali is he's probably the single most important Usuli scholar in the history of Islam. Yes. I mean, obviously Imam Shafi'i is the first to codify the science. But Imam Juwayni, who was the great initiator of the Maqasidi school, his student was Imam al-Ghazali, who took it to a whole other level. And then from him, Imam al-Qarafi, Imam al-Shatibi, all the great Maqasidi scholars come out of Imam al-Ghazali's work. And one of the ironies, I think, in Saudi Arabia is a lot of these students disparage him, even the ones that study at some of the universities there. And yet Ibn Qudama, his Rawdat al-Nadr, which is the basis of Hanbali Usul now, that's what they all study, is an abridgment of Imam al-Ghazali's Mustasfa. So there's an irony in there. But I once asked Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya, who I think is arguably probably the greatest Sunni Usuli scholar alive today, and I think his books establish that fact. But I asked him once, if he only had one Usuli book that would, if we lost all of them except for one, what would it be? And he said Mustasfa. There's no question. There's not even a debate about it. So I thought that was pretty amazing. So this book is a section on Sharh al-Ta'am, which is what we would call gluttony, gula, was one of the deadly sins in Europe in the Catholic tradition. And gula is the bottom one. It's like literally at the bottom, and this is where the Muslims put it as well. It's kind of the base of all the other sins, and that's why it was considered so important to focus on the dangers of it, because all of the other sins, in essence, arrive out of it. I mean, it's interesting that the first sin of our species is eating.
Right.
And it's interesting because the Muslims considered, a lot of the Mufassirun considered the forbidden fruit was wheat. It wasn't apple. It was wheat, which is agriculture. But now we know the harm of wheat and lectins, what they call lectins,
yes, right.
which a lot of people are intolerant to. And the Prophet we know never ate wheat. There's no hadith indicates that he ever ate wheat. He ate barley, which is a very different grain. But anyway,
they called it ta'am.
Yeah, ta'am. Yeah, which is it's aish. It's like yam in Yoruba, I think, or Igbo. I think it's Yoruba. Yam means to eat. So the yam, which is the potato, West African potato, that's the basis of their aish. Every culture has a aish, you know, and so khubz is definitely one of the foundational foods. Like in Ireland, it was potatoes for a long time, even though they were actually imported from America. But the chapter really is about hunger and the benefits of hunger. And we know now intermittent fasting, like there's a lot of science to support the idea of just feeling hungry. So there's books now written. There's a book written on intermittent fasting by a physician from England. And he suggested Mondays and Thursdays just because he'd heard that the Muslims prefer those days. So he just put it in there. But he did it from purely a scientific basis. There's also some of the great scholars from the tradition of Tasawwuf, like Abu Madian al-Ghawth, really based his madhab on hunger. So the Abu Madian al-Ghawth, they had the samt, sahar, ju', right? So and uzla. Those were the four. They call that madhab al-abdal. So being silent, being hungry, and then not sleeping a lot, and then uzla, being alone, you know, isolation. And because company, you talk, the more you talk, the more trouble you get into. The more you eat, the more trouble you get into. The more you sleep, you waste your life. These were all, this is what they call riyada, you know, which is like spiritual exercise. And it's what's interesting about people is that they'll go to a gym and do all this work to keep their body in shape, but they don't do anything for their heart or their soul. And if people find out they have a physical heart disease, they'll go to a doctor, they'll find whatever they can, they'll take medicines, they'll follow the regime, they'll even go into open heart surgery, they'll let them cut open their chest. But like kibar, you know, they don't even think about the spiritual diseases of the heart, which can be reduced to those 7 major ones. Like I actually, as an exercise, took there's over 30 diseases in Imam Al-Ghazali's book.
Yeah, what's interesting about this chapter is the hadith that he quotes Aisha radiallahu anha as reporting that the Prophet said that the very first bid'ah that was introduced was shib'a, was sort of satiation society.
That is very interesting because, and partly, I mean, we have to also food was scarce. Like we tend to forget that they were. They were desert Arabs. You know, food was scarce. And I think putting hunger in context, also remembering that food is one of the great blessings of Allah. And He said, الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. You know, that's a reason to worship Allah. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. Let them worship the Lord of this house who did this and this. So food and security, which is Maslow's the base of his pyramid,
Right.
Physiological needs. Although the Prophet puts security over those, and I think that's a better pyramid. But food is a great blessing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ, the zina, dress well when you go to the masjid, which was encouraged to wear your best clothes.
Right.
And we used to have the tradition here called Sunday best, and it always saddens me to see Muslims go to Friday Jummah in t-shirts,
Yes, right.
which is underwear.
Yeah.
In every traditional culture, it's underwear. And nobody in Morocco, when I first went to Morocco, Jummah, they always dressed up for it. Really wore nice clothes. And people, and then in America, Friday's casual dress day in a lot of companies and things. So people tend to do that. But then Allah says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. Eat and drink, but not to excess, because Allah does not love those who go to excess. And so israf is really what's prohibited. But eating, we're commanded in many verses. I mean, even though the command is for nadab or ibaha, there are many verses where Allah says, kulu min at-tayyibat. Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. I mean, there are many verses where Allah says, in Surah Al-Mulk, وَكُلُوا مِنْ رِزْقِهِ, So
from his sustenance.
Eat from his sustenance. So food is a great blessing, and it's also a source of communal experience. It's said that Abdul Muttalib never ate alone, and the Arabs don't like to eat alone generally. Mauritanians are like that. Most West Africans are like that. My experience of Africans is they tend really not to. They see eating alone as something wrong with you. They'd rather not eat than eat.
North Africans, too.
Yeah, and so
kind of make a joke. My wife, she's from North Africa, so come eat.
So the eating is a beautiful way for people to come together and enjoy the communal experience, and that's one of the things about Ramadan. It's a great blessing, but sharah, which is this, with a soft H, sharah, is gula. It's where you're, nehem, you have a lot of desire for food, and and a lot of people, now sociologists call it grazing. They call them food contacts. So on average, Americans are having like 17 food contacts a day.
Oh, okay.
Whereas traditionally, in all traditional societies, people ate at fixed times, and they didn't. They might drink water. They didn't eat except these. But now people are always snacking.
So you actually called it grazing.
Grazing,
It seems appropriate to call it.
Well, there's a Imam Sahar Tusturi, he somebody asked him, what do you say about a man who eats once a day? And he said, Akul al-Anbiya, it's the way prophets eat. He said, what about twice a day? He said, Akul al-Salihin. And he said, what about 3 times a day? He said, build a trough. Just... they're like an animal,
right.
And so now people eat several times a day, and they even encourage this idea of keeping your metabolism up, so you should eat small meals several times a day. I mean, that's so. I'm sorry, I don't buy that, because it's so anti-fitra to do that.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Well, not just wondering, but I know that there are a lot of people who are out there who struggle with food, struggle with sort of just developing a discipline. You're having the right diet and things like that, and eating the right types of things. So
Al-Ghazali gives good advice, because he says that you should do it with tadrij.
Right.
Like, just do it slowly. Don't try to. What the problem with dieting is people stop and do everything at once. He says just take one luqma, one extra morsel, and just don't eat it. If you're eating 2 pieces of toast in the morning, just start eating 1 piece of toast. Just do it slowly. The most important thing to me about diet, and I've studied it a lot, and it's been of interest to me. When I grew up, my mother was very involved in a natural diet from early on. So I grew up with that whole movement in the 60s. I mean, she was an early onsetter for that. But the most important thing is to eat good food. If you can afford it, it's better to spend more money on good food and eat less of it than on
Yes.
cheap food and eat a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because if you eat good food, you need less. And one of the things about a lot of people are suffering in America from malnutrition because they eat such bad food. So their cells are actually malnourished. So they're hungry all the time. It's not because they're not eating enough.
Right.
It's because they're not eating enough of the
type
right
of
food.
Right. Yeah.
So if you eat good food, you're gonna eat less. And I've my wife's here, so she'll testify this. But I have for years only had 2 meals a day. Like I could not eat 3 meals a day.
Right.
I would just feel sick.
Right.
And so I eat in the morning and then in the evening. And it's better to eat early if you can. Like right now it's Ramadan, so we're eating late. But a lot of 80% of our health problems in the United States are directly related to diet.
Right. Right.
And so diet was very important in the Islamic tradition. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the things, Imam Malik, as you know, because you're Maliki, Imam Malik there's only a few verses about what's haram. You've got Baqarah, Al-Ma'idah, and then Al-An'am, I think, is the only other one. Right. It's all in the cow, and then the table spread, and then Al-An'am. So they're in the appropriate named verses.
Right.
But it's very simple what Allah has prohibited. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم واشكروا لله إن كنتم إياه تعبدون. And then حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله. And then ومن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه. So if you're in dire need, then you can eat what's not prohibited. But there it's just carrion, dead meat, which unfortunately most of the meat here, because they stun them, and in the other verse, حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل وما أهل
ما أهل به.
it's the bihi is after.
حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير ما أهل به لغير الله.
لا وما أهل لغير الله به. So the munkhaniqatu is prohibited, which is strangulation, which they do that with some animals now. And the mawqudatu is Ibn al-Arabi in his tafsir actually mentions the bunduq. The qaws al-bunduq, which is a gun basically. So stun gun, anything like that is mawquda. The mutaraddiya, like they fall off a cliff or something, and then the natiha, the gouge by another animal. And then ma akala sab'u. So Allah doesn't prohibit very many things in the Quran, and then يسألونك ماذا أحل لهم. They ask you what's permissible for them, and he's
أحل لهم الطيبات وما علمتم به من الجوارح.
So the طيبات are permitted, and so كلوا حلالا طيبا. There's verses, eat good, and whenever it talks about food, it has طيب with it.
Right.
Now, obviously, the dominant meaning for the fuqaha was always the source.
Right.
But I think and that I think that's exactly عموم اللفظ. So it's the general statement. And obviously there's a hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu, when he said to the Prophet was talking about if your food's pure, your prayer will be answered. And Mu'adh said, Ya Rasulullah, ad'u li yaj'alni mustajab ad-da'wa. And he said, atib mat'amak. Make your food pure, takun mustajab ad-da'wa, that you will have your prayers answered. So that's obviously financially, like where your money's from and where the source is. And I know for a fact that one of the great salihin of our age, Muhammad Zakaria, who I met, did you ever meet him in Medina? He was over 100. He was about 110 when I met him.
I've heard you speak about him a number of occasions.
He was amazing, man. He was from Bukhara. But his wara', his scrupulousness, he would only buy from the butchers that he knew prayed 5 prayers in the masjid. Like they were really scrupulous about, and he was so scrupulous about his food, but he had incredible energy for ibadah. And that's one of the things, is that the exhaustion comes from food that's not halal.
Right.
And there are many, Ya ayyuha ar-rusul kulu min at-tayyibat wa'amalu salihan. Yeah, so eat from the good things and do good things. So the energy to do good things comes from the tayyibat. Right. So,
well, and it's an important part of this, because we're talking about the benefits of hunger, and one of the benefits he lists is that it helps you have a clear mind, because of the stomach being empty, and so like people feel heavy.
Yeah, the Arabs say al-bitna tudhib al-fitna. A pouch will remove
your intelligence.
Filling the stomach.
Right.
And
I think it's extremely important for people just to have this concern about eating the right type of things.
I think for me, look, there's 2 things I would say. One, hunger. Remember, these people were really like monks that got married. I mean, when you read these books, people have to remember these were serious practitioners that were also engaged actively in what some would call like a path of sanctification. They're on the path of the saint. They really want to have wusul to God.
Yes,
Not everybody's that, and I don't like to preach that. I've seen some people do that, and I think it's unfair to a lot of people because there's a baseline, and that's why this religion is not about hunger. Hunger is beneficial, but if you're eating halal food, if you know it's halal, if you're a carpenter and your work is halal, and you're doing something really that's halal, and you buy that food and it's halal, eat as much as you want. I mean, that's the reality of it. The problem is the shubuhat in food now. And then also we have all I'm not saying that, that's hyperbole, I hope people get that. But in other words, it's more important to eat food that's halal, in the real meaning of that word, halal and tayyib, than to deprive yourself, of food and then eat food that has shubha in it when you do eat. So that's really important. But undeniably, and I tend to, during the year, I'll take like 10 days and just go on water, or juice. So I've done that regularly for years, and I actually really, I've always benefited from that. So that's not really a spiritual fast, but although it has spiritual benefits, it's more just cleaning the body. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ used senna twice a year. It's in Al-Bukhari. So he actually cleaned his bowels by just completely getting rid of all the excess, because we tend to carry excess food, and Sayyidina Ali's famous statement, لا تجعلوا معدتكم أو معدكم مقابر الحيوانات. Don't make your stomachs graveyards for animals by eating meat. And what's interesting to me also, because that's another problem for me, meat consumption is a big problem, and I would argue now ethically that eating fish, unless it's fish that
it's farm. Well,
farm fish.
Not farm fish, but the wild fish. The wild fish.
No, farm fish.
Farm fish.
Yeah, because hopefully,
I thought it was the opposite. I thought
no,
farm
it's
fish
the
is the
opposite. Farm fish is not, because what's happening, the wilds, they're all disappearing. Like we're probably between 85 to 95% of complete collapse in the ocean. I read I have a book called Bloom, which is about the takeover of the jellyfish. They're taking over the ocean because all the fish are dying, and so the jellyfish are thriving, which is amazing for me because the jellyfish is a spineless consumer, right? So that's what's thriving, like the sharks and the swordfish and the whales. All those amazing creatures are disappearing. The spineless consumer, which is still amazing. I mean, jellyfish are amazing. I've been stung by a jellyfish, so I know how amazing they are. But so we have a crisis. And then meat, the way meat is raised, is totally unethical. And if you want to see one of the most troubling films, I actually could not watch the whole thing, but there's a film called Earthlings, which is about just the cruelty to animals. And I could not watch, I had to turn it off because it was just so deeply troubling to me. Like, what we do to animals is so wrong, because animals are sentient beings. And they have a right to be treated well, even when they're sacrificed. The Prophet ﷺ, one of my favorite hadiths of all the hadiths is that Allah, Inna Allah kataba al-ihsana ala kulli shay'in. You know, He decreed excellence, beauty, virtue in everything. Kataba al-ihsana ala kulli shay'in. But then, and it really threw me off for a long time, and I never saw this in any commentaries, but I wondered why he went to فَإِذَا ذَبَحْتُمْ فَأَحْسِنُوا الذِّبْحَ. You know, why would he go to dhibh as his analogy? And I realized that he was taking the ugliest thing in the world and saying, in that thing there still has to be some beauty. And
bring the beauty out of it.
How do you do it? By doing it well, having a sharp knife. فَلْيُرِيحْ ذَبِيحَتُهُ. Give repose, solace to this poor creature. And he once saw a man sacrifice an animal in front of another animal, and he said, why did you sacrifice that twice? You know, because that animal sees that and it feels, it has sentience.
الفتنة أشد من القتل.
Is exactly, So that's really important to lessen meat. And what struck me about the Muwatta, because obviously the hadith in Al-Bukhari, al-lahmu sayyidu ta'am, right? That meat is the sayyid of food. You know, it's the master. But the sayyid, you only go to them when you need it. You don't want to go to the sayyid all the time.
But it's also luhum muhadda
in Baqar. That hadith is that al-Baqar luhum muhadda'un wa albanuha shifa. But in the hadith in the Muwatta, he says he saw Jabir ibn Abdullah, and he had himalu lahman ma'ahu. And he said, Ma hada, you know, like, what's this? And he said, qarimtu ila lahmi. You know, qarima, yaqramu, for the Arab people out there, the interest in Arabic, it's specifically when you desire meat. So qarim in Arabic is somebody who likes meat, because not everybody likes meat. Some people. And in fact, you can be a vegetarian because it's sunnah to be vegetarian, believe it or not. It's sunnah by iqrar, because the sunnah, right, is aqwal. They're prioritized over any other sunnah. Aqwal, and then af'al.
Statements, actions.
And then the
authorizations.
Authorizations. And there is one Sahabi who was a vegetarian. Amr Abil Lahm.
Abil Lahm.
Abdul
Malik ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Malik, or I think it's Abdul Malik ibn
There's
Abdullah,
different versions of his name, but his laqab was Abil Lahm. And he asked the Prophet, he said, I didn't like to eat meat, and the Prophet aqarrahu alayh. So, but you can't do it ta'abbudan. That's where the ulama would differ. You can't do it as an act of devotion, because the sunnah, the Prophet's personal sunnah, is to eat meat. But by today's standards, he would be considered a semi-vegetarian, because he ate very little meat. And one of the interesting things now is that the Eid, the whole purpose of the Eid al-Adha was to give poor people meat, because like in India, fool, what they call adas, you know, the lentils, dal. Dal is the meat of the poor people. And in Sudan, it was the fool Sudani, peanuts. Like in West Africa, all the poor people eat peanuts as their source of protein. Right? And so we forget, like eggs is a really good source of protein. But eating a lot of meat is dangerous. So when Omar saw him, he said, qarimna lil-lahmi. And he said, in one riwayah, he says, every time you get hungry for meat, you buy it. Because he said he bought a dirham's worth, which would have been a lot. And then he said, you know, أَلَا يُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَنْ يَطْوِيَ بَطْنَهُ لِأَخِيهِ. Right? like you eat less so your brother can eat more.
Right.
Because one of the things
like
about the
fold your
planet,
stomach.
but
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things about the planet now is that you have such a disparity. Like you have people. I had one of my sheikhs said, "Inni ta'jabtu min qawmin ya'ummuhu dinu ta'awuni wal ikha alladhi wajaba, فبعضهم ميت جوعا وبعضهم من تخمة ميت أو ميت طربا." He said, "I'm amazed at a people who they share a religion of brotherhood, and yet some are dying of overeating and others are dying of starvation." And this is one of the mad things about our planet, is you have people literally dying of diseases of overeating, and you have people right now in Yemen. I mean, Yemen's threatened by famine, right? We've got famine in Syria, in place. We have many areas in Africa right now. Somalia is in a real crisis. Eritrea is in a crisis. So, you know, these are things for us to think about. You know, and I try to remind my kids before we eat. You know, just. This is a great blessing. There's people that don't have this blessing, and which is one of the purposes of Ramadan is to experience hunger. I mean, that's one of the benefits of it.
It was interesting is that before I came here, I was at my dentist, and they had a program on the TV screen at the moment, and they were showing these Philly cheesesteaks, you know, and I was like, I looked at my daughter, I looked at my wife, and we were like, oh my God, you know, Philly cheesesteaks on the TV, you know, and of course, naturally, I mean, we like meat.
Philly.
Yeah, I'm from Philly, right? Yeah. And so we love some cheesesteaks, and it's hard to find hoagies, but the authentic cheesesteaks, you know, you have to get them from Philadelphia, you know, but naturally. We incline towards meat, and people eat meat, and people love meat. Yeah. And I'm certain that there are some people who are okay. Well, yeah, I know what I need to. I know that that's probably what I should do. But you know, is there really truly benefit to actually being hungry? You understand? You know, so.
Well,
is
there's a benefit, undeniably, and you know, just to conclude about meat, Sayyidina Omar prohibited meat 2 days in a row in Medina when he was caliph. So he was very concerned about the overconsumption of meat, and we know now that cows are one of the major problems on the planet. You know, so much of the wheat, it takes 7 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of meat. And so, Jeremy Rifkin wrote a book, Beyond Beef, about the crises of that we need to stop eating beef. And again, the Prophet never ate beef, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Although it is in the Quran, Marabt al-Hajj told me when I asked him about that, he said, you know, Jabi Ajrin Samin, you know, Ibrahim gave a veal. Which is a choice. People who know beef, they know that veal is like, that's really good meat. Quality, So, so it is permissible.
But in the context of like a feast or like honoring someone.
Yeah, exactly. That's generally how it is. But to eat meat like several times a week or three times a day.
Some
people eat it 3 times a day, which is crazy. So it's not good for you. But in Imam Asawi mentions that a woman of stature, you know, the husband has to provide 3 times a week. So that was a wealthy woman, right? So anyway, hunger is definitely an important thing spiritually, traditionally. Fasting was a practice. If you're going to fast extra, I would recommend the 3 white days. That's what Malik did, radiallahu anhu. That's really the Prophet's practice. One of the things about the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, one of the things about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam is that his Sahaba, whenever they took on a practice, they maintained it their whole life. They didn't, you know, we kind of dip in and out, do things every once in a while. So it's always better to do a little, but be continuous. Khairul a'mal adwamu anqal. You know, the best of actions are continuous, even if they're smaller amounts. And so the same is true for food. I think, you know, just make it a practice to go without food. Imam Al-Ghazali recommends every once in a while feeding your children something really simple like just bread or rice without anything else, just to so they know that these things, be tough on yourselves because blessings don't always last. But the important thing, I think, of all things, is to be grateful for what you have. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَيَرْضَى لَكُمْ لا يرضى لأحدكم أن يأكل الأكلة فليحمد الله عليها. That Allah is pleased that you eat as long as you thank Him for it. And so it's very important to begin Bismillah. And the Quran reminds us both, like, don't eat other than what you've named Allah on. To begin Bismillah is very important, because the shayateen eat with you if you don't, and they get strong. Famous hadith. It's a humorous hadith, but it's an interesting hadith. And then the other is that that when you finish the food, always praise Allah. Like Alhamdulillah alladhi at'amana hadha at-ta'am wa razaqanihi min ghayri hawlin minhu wa la quwwa. Alhamdulillah alladhi at'amana wa saqana wa arwana wa ashba'ana wa ja'alna min al-muslimin. Making those du'as are really important. To begin with a du'a, Allahumma barak lana fima razaqtana wa zidna khayran minhu. That's what I always do with my boys before we eat. And then I always make a dua for the person that cooked, which is usually my wife. Just to remind them also that it's a great blessing to be served.
No, that's a good point. Teach a lot of us.
So
teach a lot of us area.
Question. David mentions and asks, I think the Sheikh touched on it in terms of stunning the chicken, where at times the chicken can die. What is the opinion on this? Is this halal to eat or best to avoid it? And also he asks, how many times a week? Is there a recommended time of how much meat you should eat per week according to the Sunnah or science? So,
I mean, if you go by the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ ate meat quite rarely, but partly, it was because meat was wealth, like livestock is wealth in traditional cultures. So you don't sacrifice unless you have a guest or something like that. And Mauritanians always, where I lived in Mauritania, they always loved the guest because they would sacrifice. But even the Mauritanians that I lived with, traditionally they just sprinkled a little bit of meat on. It's like the Chinese. The Chinese just add a little bit for taste, but they don't eat a lot of meat. Like we eat this huge. You'll have these people that eat this pound steak.
Yes, right.
It's amazing how they can consume that much meat.
Like Moroccans, they put the meat right in the middle of the couscous.
Yeah.
So you have to dig. You have to go towards it.
So I think that depends on. I mean, obviously it's halal, and we can't tell anybody not to eat. It's very important that these things, a lot of these things are by choice. As long as it's halal and you can afford it, it's permitted to eat it unless it's going to harm your health. And that's why we shouldn't forget that, that we're not trying to deprive people of the blessings that Allah has given them. But what's good for you, we know that eating a lot of meat's not good for you. Arteriosclerosis comes from it. So I personally, I'm semi-vegetarian, and I don't like to eat meat that's not organic and free range. Even the eggs I eat are free range. These are luxuries. I'm very well aware of that. A lot of people can't afford.
Well, it's interesting, Ibrahim Ibn Adham's statement to someone who came to him complaining about the high price of the food. It's
supply and demand.
Make it cheap,
That's Sufi economics.
Cheapen it with hunger.
Yeah, Sufi economics. Because he just told him, don't eat it, and the price will go down because it's supply and demand. That's a good point. So, but if you're able to raise chickens, that's a blessing, because they really provide for you and they're easy maintenance.
But that was also a question related to like stunning the chicken and chicken.
Yeah, look, a lot of meat now, they stun it first before they slaughter it. It's definitely a shubha in that.
I think the person has actually said that they stun it and the chicken actually dies before.
No, that's a mawquda. That's prohibited.
You can't eat that.
Yeah, you can't eat that. Although this is a khilaf, and Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi this was a khilaf in the Andalusians because طعم أهل الكتاب,
It's a fatal, yes, that
yeah,
issue.
حل لكم, طعم الذين أوتوا الكتاب.
حل
Yeah.
لكم, yeah.
So the food of the people of the book is halal for you. I would, if you're going to eat that, I would eat free range organic kosher before I eat any Christian meat.
Right.
I think most, like the idea that Safeway's Christian or any of these things, it's very doubtful. And then remember, a lot of the meat is in the same places where there's pork.
Yes, right.
And a lot of, they don't clean, they'll just grind the meat from the same, so they'll do pork and then they'll do beef and things. So they found horse meat in Safeway meat. So I the only one I would trust is the kosher meat. I think they have very rigorous, especially the more like organic free range. But again, a lot of people don't want to support because some of it, and will end up supporting maybe Israel or something like that. So there's people that have issues with that. But yeah, it's a big problem, So the best thing is, I think our Muslim community needs to be more vigilant about supporting halal, but I would really prefer if they do, free range, treat the animals humanely, because I personally think eating a lot of the animals is just not, it's unethical now, just the way they're killed and raised. I mean, I've seen how they raise modern animals. My grandfather had a cattle ranch, and so I spent summers on a cattle ranch. And he really cared about animals. It was a very different world. Now it's just what they do. They feed them other animals now, which is crazy. That's how they got mad cow's disease and things.
There any other questions there?
Those are the two main ones.
Oh, really? Okay.
There was a lot of people asking about the Sheikh's personal diet routine.
Oh, okay.
I think he's actually
expressed it, articulated.
I mean, I don't eat that much, and partly, I mean, I gain weight very easily, so it's just genes. But I don't eat very much. But I do try to eat really good food. I don't eat sugar. I don't, now I was very disciplined for years, and then I kind of went off the wagon and got lax on sweets. But I've kind of returned to, I'm much more rigorous about
I was actually surprised a couple of years ago when we were in Abu Dhabi, you pulled out a candy bar. It's the first time I ever saw you with a candy bar. Yeah. But you gave most of it away. You gave most of it away.
What kind of candy?
Chocolate. It's chocolate.
Oh, okay.
Chocolate,
it might have been like
because it was fair
somebody
trade.
gave me
It was fair trade.
Fair trade chocolate. Yeah, because I don't. He's exposing me now. Yeah. No, I don't have.
I've never seen him eat cake.
I don't eat
ice cream.
Cake.
Nothing.
I don't. I like ice cream. Good ice cream, but rare. The only thing that I can't resist is the asabi'. Those little halwani. Like the baklava type.
Exactly.
Those things, if they're fresh, I keep the bowl away from me because I'll just expose myself. But I'm very disciplined on that. I eat fruit every morning. Yeah. So, but that's. I'm pretty try just to stay healthy.
Alhamdulillah, that's great.
Questions and thoughts. I'm sorry. On the Sheikh's views on veganism. And, I'm against any fad diets.
I really think it's dangerous. I think veganism is anti-fitra. Every civilization ate meat. There are very few civilizations, even the Hindus, so a lot of them are vegetarian, but that's a religious, comes out of their religion. But even Buddhists traditionally ate meat. They usually had Muslims kill it because they couldn't kill it. But if the Muslims killed it, they could eat it. So the Muslims were traditionally.
But are they're vegetarians or vegans? I mean, but are they vegan as well?
They're not vegans.
They're not vegan, right?
I really think fad diets are very dangerous personally, and I've seen people really get sick from fad diets. So I'm not. I know that a lot of the principles of veganism are very sound. Like having a lot more vegetables, and you know, but some vegans are very, you know, it just depends on what type.
So
I think
it should be vegetables and fruit.
Yeah,
rather
the
than fruit and
paleo
vegetable.
diet. The paleo diet is. I think a lot of it depends on where you are genetically, from where you're from, and what type of diet. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So it depends. Like some people, my wife's from Native American background, so they don't do well with carbohydrates. You know, corn is the natural maize and things like that, but wheat and things like that are not good for them, and that's why they have such high rates of obesity and diabetes. So Native Americans really suffer from modern diet, because traditionally they ate a lot of meat, buffalo, Eskimos, a lot of fish. So a lot of traditional diets were heavy on meat. You know, it just depends on where you're from. But I think fad diets generally are dangerous. Balance, moderation, and balance. But I do believe that the high carb diet is very bad for people. A good thing. Wheat should be, if it's eaten, it should be eaten in real moderation. But to eat a lot of bread is not a good thing. Now, again, these are for people that can, you know, unfortunately, good food is a lot more expensive, and it's a crime against poor people that so much of the food that they are forced to eat because of the prices is just bad food. And one of the things that when I was growing up, they had food co-ops where people got together so they could buy bulk food. And you know, this was something that I think needs to happen in places where poor people are, where they can really eat better food by cooperating together.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I wouldn't, of course, I mean, because I come from, I wouldn't necessarily say I come from poverty. I mean, there's some degree of poverty that I do come from, but I definitely live amongst people who are poor, who have been poor, but at the same time, people who just simply think they're poor.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
poverty in America.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
My immediate family, because my mother, I grew up with my mother. Yeah. We would be considered poor. But there was a lot of wealth in the family. Right. From you know, like my grandfather was extremely wealthy. My father's family was very wealthy. Right. But my immediate, you know, we got one pair of shoes for the whole year, you know. Do you remember those tennis shoes? Yeah. By the end of the year, you wrap them with the duct tape.
We used to have Bobos. We call them Bobos.
No, we had
$1.99 shoes. Yeah.
Converse.
Yeah, Converse. They're back out. They're back in style. Converse,
you know, but
there was a question actually. This part of the discussion is actually bringing a bunch of questions. But there's 3 people asking specifically about advice or thoughts, or both, on the consumption of coffee and caffeine in particular. Yeah. Especially in Ramadan, there's a lot of caffeine withdrawal, it seems.
Yeah.
Like. So there's 3 people asking thoughts and
I mean, I gave up caffeine during Ramadan. I drink tea without sugar. I think green tea is better for people, but tea is there. These are blessings. You know, I think coffee is a blessing. Again, in moderation. You shouldn't have a lot of caffeine. It's not good for you. But you know, the Yemenis call coffee khamr al-mu'minin, the wine of the believers. We're not Mormons, you know. So tea and coffee are fine, but again, it's moderation. And the worst thing is the sugar in it. One of the nice things about Arabian coffee, which I really love, the coffee they drink in Saudi Arabia, and they have it with dates, and so it's it's There's really nice. There's no sugar, and dates. 100 grams of dates do not raise blood sugar, so dates are amazing. If you have a sweet tooth, have a few dates, because it really takes care of the sugar craving.
That's great advice. Yeah. Now, I was going to say before, when I was talking about the issue with poor people, is that I just wanted to go back there just for a quick second. I just think that that's important for people. While yes, you know, they're given these very limited options, you know, oftentimes, you know, that it is important for people to understand that, you know, that you can, there are other alternatives do exist, and they can, if they really search for them, that they'll find them. and so that people don't feel that, okay, I might as well continue to not have discipline and just eat whatever I want to eat.
No, I totally agree with you.
Because actually, when I go back to, like for instance, in Philadelphia, when I go back home, I notice the things like just in people's skin, the skin color.
They don't look
you can
well.
see they don't look well,
Yeah.
or you can see it right away when you
Yeah.
look at people. I'm quite sure you noticed this as well.
Yeah.
You know, and I attribute it to just bad diet.
Bad diet.
Yeah,
No, a lot of
yeah,
it's bad diet.
Yeah.
And then also people can grow food.
Yes.
You know, if
right.
you have a backyard, even now there's what they call urban homesteading.
Yeah.
You know, if you Google that, there's a whole movement of just what you can do in your house and on your porch.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things you can do. Sprouts, which are very good.
Yes, yeah.
Those are easy to make in the house. But there's just
Right.
a lot of things that people can do. But again, you don't have to eat a lot of food.
Right.
You know, luqaymat,
Right.
yuqimna,
Yuqimna
khulba.
right.
You know, you don't need a lot of food. The Prophet ﷺ lived, Aisha radiallahu anhu, they asked her because they didn't see fire come out of the chimney of the house for 2 months. They said, what did you eat? And she said, al-aswadain,
That's what
you know, which is
the tamar wal ma'.
dates
Yeah,
and water.
yeah.
And one of the amazing things about dates is, you know, the Prophet ﷺ said a house with dates will never be hungry. That dates have all the amino acids. They're incredible food.
Right.
So there's simple foods like that you can eat that you don't need a lot of, but they're very. And then the polyphenols are very important. You know, those tend to be more expensive. When I was a kid, we used to go and pick blackberries, and because there were a lot of blackberry bushes around where we were. But berries are incredibly rich.
They lower cholesterol.
Cholesterol,
and
everything,
right,
you
yeah.
know. So, but they're unfortunately they're expensive
Yeah.
generally,
Right.
and then organic, you're going to another level too.
Right, yeah.
So, but if people can afford
gradually
those things, they're
gradually to bit to the reach, you know.
Yeah,
so
they're really good.
You work into it.
to eat those polyphenol-rich foods.
Actually, I don't want to keep Sheikh Hamza for too long because he just had, you know, a session Zaytuna.
Any more questions?
And so I know he's going to say that, but just to respect your time as well.
Allah
You know,
yubarak fikum.
you know, so if there's, I mean, maybe if you want to take one
do
more.
a couple more.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Brother Khan Faisal asks, what is your view on tackling the fast food which seems to be available on every street corner? It
Yeah.
seems like there are not many alternatives. Also, I hope to see the Sheikh again in the UK, Tigliness.
I am totally against fast food. I really am. I just think fast food is like the worst thing for people. And like I said, many people are malnourished because they're eating processed foods. And this all came out of World War II. One of the horrible consequences of World War II is that because they needed to feed these vast armies, they had to process food. And so they developed techniques of preserving food for much longer periods of time. But when the war ended, they realized, hey, you know, it's much better, so let's can all this food, and because food, it's just much cheaper for them. And so again, it's the profit motive.
They probably had a surplus too. That's the other part. They wouldn't get rid of the extra food.
So now so many people are eating, you know, all this processed food, that high salt content. If you look, sugar's in everything. And if you want to read something very interesting, Otto Frank, who was nominated for Nobel Prize over 40 times and won the Nobel Prize for microbiology, he was a Jewish physician who Hitler never killed, right? Because Hitler set him up in a laboratory in Germany, and he worked solely on the cancer problem. Between, I think, 1934 to 1945. That's all he did. And he determined that cancer cells, he actually believed that all disease was cellular malfunction. And he basically said that cancer cells their only source of nutrition is fermented sugar. So cancer thrives on fermented sugar, which is why alkaline-based diets are they're much more beneficial. Teeth caries come from acidic mouth environment. And so the more sugar you eat, the more acidic. And sugar, remember, rice is sugar, bread is sugar. People forget that these are complex sugars as opposed to simple sugars. You know, so you know, teeth are meant to last a lifetime. You know, and civilization ruins teeth. A lot of dentists ruin teeth too, because there's so many bad dentists out there. I mean, there's good dentists, but there are a lot of dentists that are very aggressive with their dentistry. But if you look at jaws from like 300,000 years ago, all the teeth are intact.
Yes, right, exactly. No plaque on the teeth.
No plaque on the teeth.
Yeah.
So, but the CWAC is really good too, because the CWAC is amazing. I mean, it really does have amazing benefits. And then oil pulling, if people, I would really recommend taking care of your teeth. Oil pulling is very good. If you Google that, using like, you know, any oil can be used, but a good oil is coconut oil. You know, where you just swish oil in your mouth for a few minutes, like 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
It draws all the bacteria out, and it's an Ayurvedic tradition. But people that practice it, you know, that have their teeth their whole life. And then rinsing immediately after food is sunnah. People forget that because cavities, dental caries occur after about 20 minutes. The bacteria begins to thrive if you don't rinse your mouth. But if you rinse your mouth well after a meal, you won't get dental caries. Right? And then there's a hadith that the angels are troubled by food between the teeth of somebody praying. تتأذى الملائكة من طعم بين أسنان المصلي. And Imam Ibn Abi Zayd, you know this book, in the Risala, Takhlil al-Asnan, is a sunnah to the Prophet used palm fiber, so he flossed his teeth, and he had beautiful teeth, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he took very good care of them. Somebody tried to count how many times he brushed during the day, and he gave up because he would use the siwak stick.
Right. So is that it?
Well, the last question was, it's kind of a funny one, but what does Sheikh Hamza think of curries and having it every day? Because Bangladeshis and others, we have it every day and probably couldn't do without it. And then lastly, any thoughts on supplements use?
I think curry, turmeric is a miracle spice. I mean, it's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-cancer. So I think curry, most places that have very hot climates use heavy spice, and I actually always thought that the reason was to protect from bacteria and things like that, and I think there's been some research on that that's proven that. So I don't think, you know, I think probably the worst thing is the oil. It's not so much the spices, although in Hinduism, in the Ayurvedic tradition, the Sunyasa period, which is the later period, they give up what is called, they call rajas food, which is spicy food. So as you get older, like 50 and beyond, in the Ayurvedic tradition, you're supposed to not eat that because that's very stimulating food. And one of the things about food is that it really does strengthen the appetites and the shahawats. And you know, people should be balanced on all those things, because if you go to any extremes, it's a way of dissipating your life's energy in things that, you know, could be directed towards higher things.
Okay, so I mean, any final words before we?
You know, I would just say, you know, again, food is a great blessing, but moderation. The Prophet, there's so many verses in the Quran about moderation. You know, la tusrifu, you know, لا تقتروا لا تبذروا you know جعلناكم أمة وسطا, we made you a middle nation, لا تطغوا في الميزان. I mean, there's so many verses about moderation and balance, and so balance is really important. Don't go to extremes. I think it's really dangerous. The Sufis historically very often went to extremes, and a lot of these books have that aspect of tasawwuf, which I think is dangerous. The Prophet was very balanced, and he liked moderation. He really was the most balanced human being that ever lived. He was balanced in his temperament, he was balanced in his eating, everything. He was just beautifully balanced. Even his hair was wavy, you know, it wasn't real curly and it wasn't straight.
Right, yeah.
He was of middle stature.
Right.
You know, everything. His color, it wasn't
Right, yeah.
pasty white. It wasn't dark.
Right.
Everything. He was just middle in everything.
Right.
And so, which is not to say anything about those extremes are just Allah's creation, but he really was just middle in everything, even physically. So I think just be balanced. Don't go to extremes. I hope I didn't offend any vegans. People get angry and why is he saying anything about vegans, or it's veganism's not a fad diet or something. I didn't mean to offend anybody. Okay, I know everybody's hypersensitive these days, but these are, in the end, I mean, I hope they're not just opinions. You know, I hope they're based on something.
It's based on something. We know that.
You know, I mean, like I try to base things on study and thinking and the book and the Sunnah, obviously, but also just reason. You know, just being reasonable. Right. You know, because I think our religion is a very reasonable religion. Right. So, but may Allah bless your Ramadan. May Allah bless Dr. Abdullah for all the work that he does. I mean, I really consider him one of the really important, he's not so young anymore, but he's still young, but one of the important young leaders, intellectual leaders in our community. So may Allah increase him and bless him. May Allah bless all of you in your Ramadan. This is hopefully the night of power. May Allah give us the benefit of this night.
Ameen.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the benefit of our fasting and our prayers. May He forgive us our shortcomings also. You know, we're weak and we admit that. And may He, inshallah, the little that we do, may it be a lot in God's, in His scales, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay. So that's it. Inshallah. We'd like to thank Sheikh Hamza and hopefully we'll see you all another time. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.